All right, this is Aaron Brightman of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. Thanks for listening. This is not a rapid reaction. This is a few hours after Rutgers had an extremely disappointing road loss at Iowa, 86-77. Snow day in New Jersey, first snowfall of the winter, and I have two younger kids, and my son, three plus. This is his first real snowfall that he'll ever remember. Is ever able to play in. So I was outside for quite a bit. Started snowman, snowball fights, all kinds of fun stuff. So delayed this, and also gave me a little bit of time to. I wanted to talk about the game, and then I wanted to talk about big picture view of the season. Now that Rutgers is in last place in the Big Ten, 0-3 start, obviously very disappointing. Really thought after Ohio State's second half that this team could build up for that there were enough positive signs from that. And I think what one of my biggest takeaways is that this team is just extremely inconsistent. They've shown flashes of being good. Listen, that Seton Hall win right now is holding up. It's aging very well. Seton Hall earned their second top 10 win at home on Saturday against number 7 Marquette. They previously beat UConn. They just beat Providence on the road. That's 3 ranked Big East wins for Seton Hall. Their stock is way up. That win is looking really strong on the road. And the truth is, since that game, Rutgers has not looked good, and Seton Hall has totally responded, and it's been a galvanizing moment for that team. So, I guess that does make things even more frustrating. It does show that Rutgers is capable of beating good teams, but they have not been able to put it together for 40 minutes since. And a big part of that is offense. Just talking about this game today, I mean, Rutgers shot 39% from the floor. They're shooting 40% from the floor for the season. They shot 32% from 3, 6-19. They're actually shooting worse than that for the season, 30%. They were good from the line, 15-19 for 79%. They were plus 10 on the boards. Defensively, this team is not anywhere close where they need to be. And offensively, this team's not connected. They're not gelling. They're not cohesive. Their intensity level it's not an effort thing in the sense of, they didn't give up today, and they made the score. Honestly, it was closer. A 9-point loss. It did not feel like a 9-point loss. The game was not really that competitive in the second half. They fell behind by 16 points in the first half. They cut it to 7 at the half. That gave some hope that, hey, they were starting to figure things out. Mawat Mag played a great game. He had 2 back-to-back threes at the end of the first half. He finished with a double-double, 24 points, 10 rebounds. He was 7-15 from the floor, 3-6 from 3, 7-10 from the foul line. But unfortunately, there just wasn't enough balance. I mean, the rest of the starting lineup did not give Rutgers enough tonight. Austin Williams played really well again. Even better, I mean, just offensively. He was 14 points, 6 of 8 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, 4 rebounds. He defensively, his physicality, his size, they need that in the backcourt in the Big Ten. And I think that's one thing we're seeing is that the size of the backcourt, the physicality of the backcourt is not where Rutgers has been in the past, and it's created an issue defensively. Iowa, once again, really good at ball reversals, rotations in the half court. Rutgers was just a step slow. The help side defense, their ability to close out on threes. Iowa isn't a particularly great team on threes this year. They were 7-14. They don't even take a ton, but they're just able to move the Rutgers defense where they wanted to move them in terms of creating good looks. And Rutgers wasn't able to dictate anything out of their defense. They weren't able to create offense off their defense. They weren't able to get stops. And that lack of physicality, that lack of size is hurting them. I have a whole list of notes here. I just want to it's kind of all over the place. But I did want to say that the team did not quit. That's a positive. But nonetheless, it's a really disappointing performance. They were behind the whole game. They keep digging themselves into huge holes to start games. That's a big problem. Um, they started 1 of 15 from the floor. They just aren't able to get to any flow offensively. There's too much ISO. There's too much standing around. There's not enough ball reversals. There's not enough inside out. Big problem. One thing I wanted to say about Cliff, people are saying that Cliff's regressed. I don't think he's regressed. I don't think he's forgotten or his best skills have diminished. I think that his inability to create offense on his own is more glaring because of the way the roster is constructed now. I think you don't have a consistent shooting threat behind three. You don't have Cam Spencer anymore. You don't have Geo Baker anymore. You don't have Ron Harper Jr. anymore. So when you don't have a consistent threat from three, I mean, Hyatt has been solid. 3-pointers are not his strength. Like I said, he's been the most consistent player this year. What is he? Just looking real quick. What he's shooting this year from three. Hyatt is shooting right now 35% from three. It's not bad at all, but I don't think opponents are scared of him from behind the arc. They're not scared of him behind the arc the way they were of Cam Spencer, Gio, or Ron. So that's hurting Cliff. Cliff continues to get, when he gets the ball on the post, they're collapsing on him. And he still hasn't. He's still struggling a little bit to swing the ball, to find open teammates, but there's not a consistent shooting threat from the arc. Rutgers isn't hitting shots from behind the arc. So when you do that, it's kind of like when you have a passing game in football, you're sending 8 to the line, right? So teams are not getting confused or prioritizing much else. And Cliff is not getting a lot of space. And we know that he operates best in space. I think some of the smaller guards aren't. I think Noah actually is pretty good at feeding Cliff, but I think that listen, Paul knew how to feed Cliff. Gio and Ron obviously knew how to. They got a lot of lobs with him. They got him in the air. Cam. People are going to say this is an excuse, but it's a legitimate reality. Is the way the roster is constructed was not the plan, right? You lost Cam Spencer and Paul Mulcahy in May and June. And that really, I think, more than people want to necessarily think about or give credence to, is that is hurting this team. Cam and Paul had length, they had size, they were experienced. Listen, Paul hurt this team down the stretch last year. There's no denying that, but he was hurt. He played through a lot. I didn't love some of the way he acted in terms of his leadership sometimes on the court, the way he was screaming at other teammates. I think the vibe wasn't great there sometimes. But that being said, Paul was a pass-first guard. He had certain skills that at times were dominant, whether it was booty ball, backing a smaller defender down. He was able to penetrate and score. He was able to penetrate and kick out. He was, able to pass over the defense. He's 6'6". I think the thing for me right now is if you look at Rutgers offensively, what can they count on? There's nothing they can count on the offensive end. At times, Derek Simpson has been good in terms of creating the shot, in terms of his mid-range game. Noah's been good at times. Mawat looked really good at times today. He played really well. Jamichael Davis, I thought, he was a little sloppy with the ball. He had 3 turnovers, but he's able to get to the rim and score. He had 10 points today, and he plays with an energy. But all of these things are happening in flashes. They're not happening on a consistent level. And Rutgers can't count on any one thing at one time. Last year, and I know people said Cam disappeared in certain games, and, there's certain games he had bad games, but, for the most part, I mean, he shot over 40% from three. If they don't have that this year, Andre is the closest. He's 35%. But again, like I said, defenses aren't honing in on him the way they respected other 3-point shooters on this roster in the past. Paul brought a certain element to the offense that they don't have right now. And, Cliff, I think, again, he doesn't have that support around him. He's not a naturally gifted offensive player. He's just not. And one thing that I noticed stats wise that was interesting, which I think is telling of this team, is offensive rebounds. The front court is not rebounding offensively and taking advantage of offensive rebounds the way they need to. In terms of the offensive rebounding, they had 18 rebounds today. That's actually really good, but they only had, what was it? Not a lot of points off offensive rebounds. Second chance points, 14. So they out-rebounded Iowa on the offensive glass 18-8, and they only held an edge of 14-13 on second chance points. That's not good enough. They were 12 of 28 on layups and dunks. That's not good enough. Things that they're not getting any easy baskets, and that's a problem. And even for the season, like offensive rebounding, like I was hinting at, center position, they're 166 nationally with a 37% offensive rebounding rate. Power forward, 21.9%, 255th. So as a whole, right, they rebounded better today, but they couldn't take advantage. They're shooting really poorly from 2-point range this season. As a whole, they're 317th nationally, 45%. 3-point range, 29%, 325th. Free throws have been better the last two games. They shot 79% in this game. They're only 66.6 for the year at 308. It's not a good shooting team. It's actually, looking back historically, this tracks with the first two teams of Pikel, those two early teams that struggled offensively quite a bit in terms of offensive efficiency. Yeah, it's as bad as it's not as bad as those two teams, but it's the worst sense in terms of shooting. 3-point wise, actually, right now they're tracking as the worst Pikel team he's had. Defensively, as a whole, statistically, they look good. They're 14th nationally, but a lot of that came earlier in the season, and they're just not able to string together stops. And I think a key, too, is with the physicality and the size of Rutgers is they're not wearing teams down with their defense the way they have in the past. And, even those early Pikel teams, defensively, they were at times, right? And they were able to make it a rock fight, and they're not making things a rock fight. And, Ohio State and Iowa are two very skilled offensive teams, and they weren't really overall stopped by Rutgers. They were able to do what they wanted. Rutgers in the past, Pikel's very good at scheming, right? And taking out the best player on the other team. They're not doing that. And I don't think it's because Pikel forgot to coach. Now, that being said, the coaching staff has to figure it out, because the bottom line is this team isn't doing their identity in terms of what they do well. That they're not doing anything well. And that's on the coaching staff. The coaching staff has to figure out how to play with this roster, and they've just been far too inconsistent. Noah Fernandez, I thought was the way he played against Seton Hall, the way he can create, it's not happening right now, and I don't know if it's a confidence thing, if it's being tentative, if it's a physicality thing, if it's a mentality thing. But he's been deemed ineffective in Big Ten play so far. Derek Simpson's been up and down, had played brilliantly the other night, did not give them much in this game against Iowa. JaMychal Davis is a freshman. He's going to be up and down. He had a bone bruise. But overall, I think he's giving you something. Austin Williams, I think, is warranted now much more playing time. He gives you that physicality on defense that you need in Big Ten play. And he's really been, today he played smart, and I think as a whole, this team, there's no continuity in their game plan, at least how they're executing it. Listen, I don't think this coaching staff forgot how to coach, but this team isn't executing a cohesive game plan on the offensive end. And I know people want to say they don't run offense and everything, but I think it's also just this team is lacking discipline, right? And they're letting missed shots impact their play, both ends of the floor. And that's a problem. I think that Going back to my notes here, again, this isn't a rapid reaction anymore. But yeah, just in terms of, Cliff, Noah, Derek, and Gavin, they're not getting enough consistent offense from. I think Noah and Gavin and potentially Derek are their best scorers, and they're not getting anything. Gavin is just really struggling right now. He's struggling to get within the flow. I thought that today was an opportunity for the guards to penetrate a little bit more and look for kickouts to Hyatt and Gavin. Didn't really happen too much, and there's just not enough movement. There's not enough screen action. It's too much. I don't want to say hero ball. I don't think this team is being selfish. I don't. I think that they're forcing things and they're lacking patience on the offensive end. And they're not generating good enough looks. And the looks that they are getting that are good, they're not making. They're not making shots. Going back to the top here, they're just not connected defensively. I think that they did a really good job against Ohio State and not fouling. Not so much in this game. They fouled a lot. There were a lot of and-ones. If you're going to foul near the rim, you can't let them make the shot. I talked about some of the roster reconstruction issues. Listen, it's a reality. Right? Noah was brought in to be a facilitator to Cam. There is no Cam. So Noah has to be more of a lead guard and a lead scorer. And he hasn't been doing it on a consistent basis. That's real. And I think it's impacting Cliff. And Paul, as much as some people didn't want him here anymore, he brought a certain stability to this offense. And maybe he was inconsistent. And, he struggled at the end of last year with injuries and everything. But he knew how to win, and he's missed 8 assists on 28 makes. That's a red flag right there. They're not sharing the basketball enough. They're not generating enough good looks and making them off of within the flow of the offense. It's a lack of offensive identity, right? This team was going to run. They're not running, and they're not scoring in the half court. What was transition? Fast break points. They outscored Iowa 13-11 in fast break points. Just not enough. In terms of coaching, I think, there's got to be a way to how do they start games better? Is it shuffling up the starting lineup? Do you get Austin Williams in the starting lineup because he has more experience? Do you I think you got to look at everything, right? I think you're at the point now, you're 8-6, you're 0-3 in the Big Ten. Everything has to be reevaluated. Everything. They are rebounding better, but they're not finishing at the rim. That's a problem. I think that the lack of consistent scoring, right? You're again going back to someone that can hit threes for you, or someone that can score inside. They don't have a consistent scorer that can stop runs. Ron Harper Jr. and Geo Baker were fantastic at killing runs of other teams because you knew you would get offense from them. Rutgers doesn't have a go-to on offense. And other teams are putting together kill shots. A kill shot is a 10-plus or more scoring run. They're not able to stop it because they can't get consistent offense from anybody. The physicality in the Big Ten, it's an issue. I think the mentality of the team. What is the mentality of the team? I think, and I don't mean this in that they're being arrogant or anything, but I think they thought they were better than they're playing, and I honestly believe they are better than this, but they need that underdog mentality now. They need that grittiness. They need to claw their way back. That's what they have to do, and we're not seeing that. Health has been an issue. They haven't had continuity in the lineups and the rotations. That people are going to say that's an excuse too, but that's also reality. That hasn't helped. Hopefully they can maintain now. Everyone's been available except, there's hopefully Agbola and Jeremiah Williams. If they can get them, Jeremiah Williams waiting on the NCAA ruling for the gambling issue. Agbola working his way back. He's been listed questionable the last few games. That would be a boost for sure. People saying they're not going to win another Big Ten game. Not true. The Big Ten is not good this year. You have Maryland twice. You have Michigan twice. You have Penn State at home. You're at Minnesota. You have Indiana next. Indiana has been a great medicine for this program the last few years. Rutgers has won 8 of the last 10. They have Indiana at home on Tuesday night at the RAC. The RAC needs to be crazy, and you got to get a win in that game. You get a win in that game, you can catch your breath a little bit. Indiana has not been good. They're not a good three-point shooting team. Rutgers has to win that game. And I think, going back to things, players are in roles that they weren't planned to be in. And I think that that's a factor. And if you want to just dismiss that, fine. And again, now it's on the coaching staff, right? Now you have players in roles that, you're asking them to do things that maybe they're not able to do on a consistent basis. So you got to look at everything. You got to look at everything, right? Go back to the drawing board a little bit, and maybe the rotations have to be changed. Maybe the lineup combinations have to be changed. Maybe you have to look to go really big at times. Nothing's working. So what can you do? You got to try something. And they are trying, but you got to keep trying because this isn't working. And again, Rutgers is not doing themselves any favors with easy baskets. They're just not getting anything offensively flowing. So I know I was a little bit redundant at times, but Rutgers long-term this season, you just want to see them get their footing. You want to see them gain some consistency and gain an identity in terms of what they do well. And the early Pikel teams, defense and rebounding, we've seen them rebound better. Defensively, they haven't been close to where they need to be. They're not generating enough consistent stops, and they're not connected enough on defense. And it's not just about forcing turnovers. It's about the mentality. It's about the physicality of wearing teams down, forcing them into bad shots, and they're not doing that. It's not just about turnovers. They're actually turning teams over at a decent clip, but they're not forcing teams. It's like body blows, right? They're not getting body blows on teams on the defensive end, and it's showing up at the end. So a little bit of a ramble. This was completely not emotional at all. I'm very disappointed and depressed and upset about where this team is. But they're also human, and there's factors involved. And I think this team is in a tough spot, but they got a battle. This is, what are they going to make of the rest of this season? Are they going to curl up in a ball and let the season, slip away, or are they going to fight back? And you have Indiana at home on Tuesday, and I believe this team is tougher than them, and they got to show it. So let's see what happens. Thanks for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful Podcast.